May 19th, 1994.
I think every woman wants to feel needed, and in politics you are.
She was a new kind of first lady.
The most important thing she needs is to really love her husband. Then any sacrifices or adjustments she has to make are only a joy.
One who changed the way the whole world looked at American women.
Her grace and charm were legendary and were very important for the American image.
And for more than half of her lifetime, she remained the keeper of the flame. Tonight, Jackie Kennedy Onassis, dead at age 64.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis died only a few moments ago, this evening at 10:15 Eastern Time at the age of 64. She left New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center in New York City just yesterday. Doctors had told her there was nothing more they could do to treat her lymph cancer and that it had spread to her liver. According to one newspaper report, Mrs. Onassis was also suffering from pneumonia and refused to take antibiotics. So she went home to her Fifth Avenue apartment to die. She spent her last hours surrounded by members of her immediate family, her children, John and Carolyn, her brother-in-law, Ted Kennedy. Standing by now outside Mrs. Onassis' home is ABC correspondent Bob Jamieson. Bob, how did the final word come?
Ted, Mrs. Onassis' longtime spokesperson and longtime friend Nancy Tuckerman confirmed that she died at 10:15 this evening, about an hour and 20 minutes ago, in her Fifth Avenue apartment just across the street from Central Park, where she was photographed only Sunday with her longtime companion Maurice Templesman. He was at her bedside when she died, along with 36-year-old Caroline, the mother of her 3 grandchildren, and her son John. Other members of the family were there, and the actress Daryl Hannah, who is John Kennedy's friend. She had lapsed in and out of a coma, according to reports throughout the day, and was in a coma when she passed away this evening. Various family members came and went all day long from this Fifth Avenue apartment, as did just common people who dropped off prayers and notes of good wishes. Senator Edward Kennedy, who spent about an hour and a half this evening with his sister-in-law, left with his wife Victoria and said, "We hope to see Mrs. Onassis tomorrow." Her sister-in-law, Ethel Kennedy, the widow of Robert F. Kennedy, who was also Mrs. Kennedy's close friend, said that the apartment was filled with love. Others expressed the fortitude which Mrs. Kennedy showed in her last hours.
Bob Jamieson, thank you very much. Also standing by live now is ABC's medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson. Tim, I must say it seems to have happened so quickly.
Well, in fact, in the category of cancer that she had, the so-called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, approximately 50% of people will be alive 5 years after the time of diagnosis. In her particular case, death occurred within about 4 months after the time of diagnosis, so it was unusually rapid. Now, we don't know if, in fact, the cancer was more advanced at the time it was announced 4 months ago than we were led to believe at that point, but she appeared certainly to have one of the more rapidly progressive forms of lymphoma.
She clearly knew that she was dying when she asked to leave the hospital yesterday, but as I noted a moment ago, the Times reported this morning that she also had pneumonia, that she had refused antibiotics. Would that have made a difference if she had taken, I mean, would that have kept her alive any longer?
It's very possible that antibiotics might have prolonged the dying process by a matter of some days. And indeed, if that is the fact that she refused them, that was probably a decision to say that she wanted to die quickly and without prolonging the dying process.
Tim Johnson, thanks very much. For more than 30 years now, Jackie O, as she came to be known, has been something of a walking contradiction. She was, arguably, the best-known woman in the world. But think about it. What is the last thing you remember her saying or writing? She did make a very few public appearances for the sake of promoting an occasional cause, but she endured that most curious form of celebrityhood. She suffered her fame largely in silence. Her comings and goings were endlessly tracked, and yet most of us knew absolutely nothing about her. Nothing, that is, after that dreadful day in November of 1963, the day that Jack Kennedy was assassinated. That day, that moment, are, as Sam Donaldson remembers, frozen in the minds of all Americans who were alive and aware at the time.
President This car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes.
It was a savage moment that day in Dallas. For the woman who was both wife and first lady, a moment of uncomprehending horror.
Something has happened in the motorcade route.
For the nation and the world, a weekend of disbelief and profound sorrow. Against this backdrop of tragedy, it became a transcending time for Jacqueline Kennedy. A time when she rose from the backstage of history to a central role that few could have predicted she would play so well.
She had a strong feeling. She had a strong way of reacting in all the time that I was with her. And so it doesn't surprise me that she handled it that way. But
Pierre Salinger, then the White House press secretary, remembers.
She carried herself with the kind of demeanor, I think, that later other widows had tried to emulate this.
So does Helen Thomas, then as now a reporter covering the White House.
She was graceful, and she was under tremendous pressure.
David Brinkley remembers also.
Why did the president go to Dallas, after all?
Lyndon Johnson persuaded him to go, because you will recall that John Kennedy barely won the election at all, and he almost lost Texas.
So the Kennedys came to Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, and got into an open car with Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie. The crowds lining the motorcade route were large and friendly.
I turned to him and said, Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you, because they were just screaming and yelling, and for both of them, not just him.
The motorcade turned onto Elm Street, drove past the Texas School Book Depository building, and the screams of delight turned to screams of horror as Lee Harvey Oswald fired his 3 shots. Nellie Connally, cradling her wounded husband John in her arms, remembers Mrs. Kennedy's first words.
The first thing she said was, Jack, what have they done to you? And that broke my heart. I knew what they had done to him by then.
The famous Zapruder film shows that Mrs. Kennedy clambered onto the trunk of the limousine. She was saved from falling by Secret Service agent Clint Hill. The motorcade raced to Parkland Hospital, where Governor Connally survived. It was too late for the president.
My heart broke for her because I knew there was no going back for her. The children and I did have 30 more years with John Connally. She and her children did not have that 30 years.
Not only was it over for the Kennedys, it was over for the country. There was a new president. And at that moment came the first of those acts by Jacqueline Kennedy that made such an indelible impression. Mrs. Kennedy stood with her husband's successor, Lyndon Johnson, as he took the oath of office in the cramped cabin of Air Force One as it sat on the tarmac at Dallas's Love Field. When Air Force One arrived back at Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington, the casket was taken off the plane by hydraulic lift. Mrs. Kennedy rode with it. United Press International White House reporter Helen Thomas was there.
Well, it was one of the saddest scenes that I think I've ever seen in American history, or certainly since I've covered the White House. Seemed the whole town converged on Andrews, all the congressional leaders and everything that was waiting for hours.
Mrs. Kennedy rode with her husband's body to Bethesda Naval Medical Center, where the autopsy was performed. At 3 o'clock the next morning, they all came back to the White House. And even though she was emotionally and physically exhausted, Mrs. Kennedy began to plan her husband's public farewell.
The first thing she said to the curator at the White House, he said, Mrs. Kennedy, is there anything I can do for you? And she said, yes, find out how Lincoln was buried.
She began to plan, but Pierre Salinger, who had flown all night to get back from an official trip, recalls her thoughts were not just of herself and her dead husband.
As I arrived, there was a small mass going on in the East Room of the White House. Jackie was there, and it was amazing to me as she came up to me afterwards and put her arm around me and said, you know, Pierre, you've had a terrible day. Why don't you spend the night here in the White House? I had never spent the night in the White House.
The president's casket rested in the White House East Room until Sunday, when it was taken to the Capitol to lie in the Great Rotunda, Mrs. Kennedy walking with it up the marble steps of the East Front. Inside, she kissed the flag-draped coffin. But again, she was mixing a strong image for the public her husband had led, with private thoughts for those who had served with him.
About 48 hours after John was killed, she went to every top advisor to the president and handed them a package. In other words, she had gone into his private things and found things that she thought that each one of them would like to have to remember John Kennedy. And I still have mine. It's a cigar with JFK on it, where he put 2 cigars in because, you know, he was a cigar smoker. And she had different things for everyone so that they would be linked to John Kennedy for the rest of their life.
During that weekend, she seemed to be thinking about history and thinking about a public farewell for her husband that would help solidify his place in history. Is that fair?
That's fair. There were 2 things she was thinking about. She was thinking about that, but in one conversation I had with her, there was something else that she was thinking about that was really very deep into her heart. How am I going to get these 2 little kids to live a normal life and come out of this disaster as good kids who can really go forward in life?
The funeral was on Monday. French President Charles de Gaulle and scores of other world leaders walked up Connecticut Avenue to attend. And at St. Matthew's Cathedral came the most memorable picture of the day, the picture that would tear the heart out of all who saw it. Young John Kennedy, Jr., who that very day turned 3, saluted his father's casket.
I was standing on the steps at St. Matthew's Cathedral when Mrs. Kennedy, first the casket was being carried out. She was walking behind the casket holding John's hand, and she sort of bent down to him, and he saluted.
There was a scene nobody has ever forgotten. How can you forget a little boy saluting his father's funeral?
Can't. The whole country, I think, there was a collective sob when they saw that.
Everybody was in tears, everyone in town, as far as I could see, including myself.
From the church, the motorcade went to Arlington Cemetery, to the spot on the hill where John Kennedy had once stood and said this was where he might want to spend eternity. Mrs. Kennedy lighted the eternal flame, a symbol that for those who lived it and those who loved it, the Kennedy presidency would never die. As for herself, over the 4 days in November that began in Dallas, Jacqueline Kennedy had changed her public image forever.
She was no longer seen as a not very busy, not very publicly involved figure who concentrated on clothes and so on, as a real woman who had been through hell and survived it.
Been through hell?
Yes. Having your husband shot in front of your face, sitting right here. If that's not hell, what is?
She has deported herself like a lady always, and I think this country can be proud of Jacqueline Kennedy.
That had to have been the defining moment in Jackie Kennedy's life. A little bit later in this broadcast, we'll be joined by a couple of my colleagues, Jeff Greenfield, and also by Diane Sawyer, who will have reports on the time, the years before the assassination in Dallas and the years after the assassination. But when we come back, we'll be joined by Kennedy family biographer Doris Kearns Goodwin and by Jackie Onassis' friend and former White House press secretary, Pierre Salinger.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by True Value.
With millions of Americans still enjoying the convenience of their local True Value, it's clear a lot of folks can't be bothered traveling to one of those out-of-the-way hardware warehouses. It's True Value's spring sale. Get a Lufkin power tape for just $6.97 and a Rubbermaid trash can for only $7.77.
Price check, aisle 300, please.
True Value. Help is just around the corner.
It's only natural that children look to their parents for answers. So to help you explain why some things that may be fine for adults aren't right for children, Anheuser-Busch offers Family Talk, free advice from professionals to use with your kids while they're still learning to be grown up. And their favorite teacher is you. Let's stop underage drinking before it starts.
It's America's #1 home wrecker, money. Why don't we talk about it? Why do we fight about it? What you need to know to avoid losing everything. Friday.
Escape for Men, Calvin Klein. Your gift with any $35 Escape for Men purchase at Bloomingdale's.
Let's talk about a real car with real equipment for a real price. The Buick Century, equipped with everything you see here and more, is just $14,995. And with an average trade-in as a down payment, the Smart Lease is just $187 per month. Just $187 per month. And the best part, in 36 months, you can purchase the car for a price based on its value. Even finance it. Or just return the car and not owe a penny. So now there's no reason to wait. Trade up to Buick for safety, quality, and real value. At a price you can believe.
To those of you who may be joining us late, you should know that at 10:15 this evening Eastern Time, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis died in her New York City apartment. She was 64. Joining us now from our Boston Bureau is Kennedy family biographer Doris Kearns Goodwin, and from our Washington Bureau, Pierre Salinger, who was press secretary to President Kennedy and remained a close friend of Jackie Kennedy Onassis. She was, and Doris, let me begin with you, she was something of a paradox in that she was, in many respects, one of the best known, if not the best known woman in the world, and yet we knew very little about her. Talk about her, talk about the non-public image during the years that she was at the White House.
You know, the interesting thing is I think precisely because she remained so aloof, because she wouldn't allow the world to enter unless she wanted it to enter, that's where that enduring fascination and mystery comes. Think about the fact that half of her life almost has been lived since that day in Dallas, and we've never put new images on top of that old image, so it's almost like she's forever young. She's forever this slightly mysterious, not knowable character. You can project anything you want onto her as a result.
Did you know her?
I knew her pretty well through my husband. He knew her better than I did. And interestingly, when I would talk to her in person, she hardly ever looked you straight in the face. She'd look off at a 45-degree angle. Only once when we talked about her children, and I talked about the bond that I thought they had with each other, did she really connect with me. Surprisingly, when I talked to her on the phone sometimes, she'd call up. We'd talk about Joe Kennedy and what he was like, and old Rose Kennedy. Then she was much more open and friendly, almost as if the barrier of the phone allowed her to be more open.
Pierre, the story that you told Sam earlier, such an extraordinary story because she was showing not only great dignity and courage, but her concern for you at a time when you clearly were much more concerned about her.
Yes, that was very stunning. You know, as I was on an airplane on the way to Japan with 6 members of the cabinet when John Kennedy was assassinated, I got back at the White House in the early morning hours of November 23rd. And the fact that she came and put her arms around me and said, you know, you've had a terrible day, and sends me up to stay in the White House was very stunning. I want to make a little comment because it is true that there was a lot of time when Jackie was not wanting to be, you know, she was not very public. And in fact, after Kennedy died, she never gave an interview to anyone except Teddy White, 5 days after JFK's assassination.
Teddy White, who was also a biographer and who wrote those extraordinary books on the making of the president.
That's correct. Now, but there is something. She did some extraordinary things in the White House, even though she was trying to keep a low profile, and even though she didn't want to get involved in politics. I mean, when you look at what she did, for example, from a cultural standpoint, she's the one that organized all these wonderful concerts in the White House. When you had Isaac Stern and Eugene Eastman and, you know, wonderful musicians coming and playing concerts at the White House, something you haven't seen before, and I don't think you've seen much of that since. What she saw about the fact that the history of the White House had deteriorated before John Kennedy became there. All kinds of furniture had been taken away by different people and sold, and she set up a committee and went out and had them find that furniture, buy it, bring it back to the White House, restructure the White House, so it remained a very historic place. These are two things that are very, very important that she did while she was there.
She changed the image of what it meant to be a First Lady, and I'd like the two of you to stand by. We're going to be joined by Liz Smith in just a little bit. The assassination of President Kennedy, as you noticed, Doris, in a sense divided Mrs. Kennedy's life almost exactly in half. As much as she craved anonymity in the years after Jack Kennedy's death, she put a remarkable public stamp on the role of First Lady during the years that she served in the White House. And Jeff Greenfield reminds us that Jackie Kennedy represented as much of a change in her way as Jack Kennedy did in his.
She held no office, wrote no laws or books, never made a movie or a record. And when she died today, she had been for more than 30 years the most famous woman in the world. Why? Because she was married to a president of the United States? So was this woman. So was this woman. They were first ladies, not icons. In fact, it was in part because she followed them that she first became so compelling a public figure. First ladies had never looked like this, never made otherwise sensible reporters thumb through fairy tales in search of metaphors.
Jackie Kennedy was just like a fresh breeze of beauty and style. They moved the glamour capital of America from Hollywood to Washington.
The Kennedy campaign had been uneasy about her, the daughter of Park Avenue Blue Bloods, the Queen Deb of the year, the young woman who rode to horses and who shopped in the boutiques of Paris. How would she play in Kenosha, Wisconsin and Wheeling, West Virginia?
Your baby due before Inauguration Day?
When's Inauguration Day?
Very well, it turned out. Heartland America saw her not as someone to resent, but to emulate. New York Times columnist Anna Quindlen was 8 years old.
It changed the entire way my mother dressed. I remember my mother's boucle suit and her pillbox hat, and I remember that my mother didn't wear the suit after 1963.
The hand-wringing handlers had missed something basic about what was happening in America in 1960. The young men who had won the war and the young women they had married were coming to power in the richest, most powerful country in the world. Yet it was a time when our first family looked like this, when the first family of our global rival looked like this. A 31-year-old first lady who looked like this was every bit as much a generational leap as the triumph of the youngest elected president in history.
She was kind of a role model. And the thing about her was she was so independent. Remember, before that, there was Mamie Eisenhower. In my mind, most of the women, the first ladies, really got their identity through their husband. Jackie Kennedy had her own identity.
I just think that everything in the White House should be the best. The entertainment that's given here. And if it's an American company that you can help, I like to do that. If it's not, just as long as it's the best.
And her celebration of artistic excellence and social glitter was seen not as snobism, but as a celebration of American self-confidence. No more were we the country cousins of Europe.
This piano was designed by Franklin Roosevelt with the eagle support. And this is the end of the room where Pablo Casals played for us.
When she gave a televised tour of the White House in 1962, carried on all 3 networks to an audience of some 50 million, it was as much a breakthrough back then as when a later First Lady took on major policy tasks.
This little chest was left by President Van Buren to his grandson.
By 1962, Americans considered her the most admired woman in the world, and her husband could joke about the crowds that mobbed her abroad.
I do not think it altogether inappropriate to introduce myself to this audience. I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
By 1963, the Kennedy family portrait, carefully framed by an image-conscious White House, had become a major political asset. So was her presence at his side, which is why she was in Dallas on that November Friday, when she became part of the most indelible shared memory of our time.
This image through television was cast throughout the globe and remained with us those 4 days of the assassination and the funeral, particularly left a permanent imprint upon our national and I dare say global consciousness.
That calmness caused America to start healing, and all of us who were young and who thought it was the tragedy of the century were able to cope better because she was coping.
And then we knew who she was supposed to be, the woman who was at our leader's side when he fell. She was supposed to be the keeper of the flame, locked forever in that one awful moment. This was what we demanded of her. And when she chose otherwise, it almost seemed a betrayal. How could she go into court to stop a writer from telling the story of the assassination? Martyred women are not supposed to do that. And how could she marry anyone else, much less an aging foreign billionaire? But she did not choose to live as a figure frozen in an American tableau. She raised her children. She went to work as a book editor. She entertained the next generation's young president. But she did remain constant in another way. There was about her, as there was with few other famous people, a permanent sense of class.
She was the most private public figure that I think the world has ever known. And to carry that off required, I think, strength of character that all of us recognize.
And I think we all in the world still thought of her as the former First Lady, but I don't think she did. I don't think she saw herself anymore as the widow of the president. She moved on with her life.
But we could not move on, which is why this is much more than the death of a former First Lady.
She went out on the back of the car, and you looked at her and you thought, this is all that's left. And you saw her on the plane with the blood on her skirt, and you thought, this is all that's left. And now it's gone.
Her death has hit home so hard more than 30 years after she left the White House because of what she brought to that house, because of how she left it, and because of how that leaving left us. I'm Jeff Greenfield for Nightline in New York.
Again, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis died this evening at the age of 64. It was 10:15 when she died in her Park Avenue apartment in New York. When we come back, we will be joined by syndicated columnist Liz Smith and rejoined by Pierre Salinger and by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
With the Toyota Touch Lease, there's never been a better time to lease a Toyota, and never a better time to lease a Toyota Camry LE for only $249 a month. Camry LE comes loaded with automatic transmission, air conditioning, dual airbags, power windows and door locks, deluxe stereo cassette, and more for only $249 a month. The Toyota Camry LE and the Toyota Touch Lease. In today's economy, it's perfect timing.
Jump on it. Go for it. Grab it before it's too late. America's favorite comedy is the hottest deal on video. Buy Mrs. Doubtfire today.
Allergies can ruin my day. My husband, a doctor, recommends Dimetap Extend Tabs.
Extend Tabs provide 12 full hours of adult allergy relief.
Dimetap relieves my allergies all day.
Doctors recommend 12-hour Dimetap Extend Tabs.
Next time, what is the future of wolves in Alaska?
Plus, explore an active volcano and go fishing with the bears on our Great Alaska Adventure.
Good Morning America here on ABC.
Thanks in part to its extraordinarily high resale value, Lexus is doing something it's never done before. It's going backwards. Because now you can lease a Lexus ES 300 luxury sedan for less than you could when it was first introduced. The Lexus ES. It's a timely value. At your New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Lexus dealer.
I'm Sam Champion for Eyewitness News, here at the National Weather Service site on Long Island. Inside that dome is NexRad Precision Radar, the ultimate weather forecasting system. It pinpoints the weather as it happens, live, right down to your neighborhood. This system is so exact, no other radar system even comes close. The exclusive AccuWeather forecast, plus the ultimate NexRad Precision Radar, only on Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Ignition? Check. Tachometer? Check. Anti-lock brakes? Check. Air conditioning? Check. Dual airbags? Check. Check. Cruise control? Check. Power sunroof? Check. 7-speaker stereo? Check, 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 check.
The Prelude VTEC from Honda. Check it out.
As you probably know by now, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis died in New York in her apartment this evening at the age of 64. We have just received a tape-recorded statement from the woman who succeeded Mrs. Kennedy in the White House as First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson. Lady Bird Johnson issued this tape this evening. We have not yet heard it, but we play it for you now.
In times of hope, she captured our hearts. In tragedy, her courage helped salve a nation's grief. She was an image of beauty and romance and leaves an empty place in the world as I have known it. We shared a unique time, and I always thought of her as my friend. I feel a poignant, personal sense of loss, and a larger one for the nation.
Lady Bird Johnson, who issued that statement this evening. We are joined now again by my old friend Pierre Salinger, who was White House press secretary under President Kennedy, by Doris Kearns Goodwin, an old friend of the Kennedys. Her husband worked for the Kennedys. She is a Kennedy biographer. And by society writer Liz Smith, who has been covering the life of Jackie Kennedy Onassis for decades. She joins us now. Is it really decades, Liz? Have you been?
It is, Ted. It's almost impossible for me to think that I won't ever have another story to write about her except this one today. She was the most towering public figure for a woman who was not a movie star, not a scientist, not some aviator who flew the Pacific. She was just herself. She had so much class and beauty. I don't think, in a funny way, outside of marrying Onassis, which put her in disfavor with some people for a little while, that she ever made a single misstep in her public life.
Pierre, that must have grated on members of the Kennedy family who are really so clannish. I mean, they are renowned for being clannish. Must have been a difficult time for her, too.
Well, that's a very good question, Ted, because I remember very well when I was summoned very rapidly to New York by Steve Smith, then the husband of Jean Smith. He's now dead. And he had heard that Jackie was going to marry Ari Onassis. And there was a very strong feeling in the Kennedy family at that time that that was a mistake. They felt very strongly that she had been the widow of the President of the United States and she should go through the rest of her life as the widow of the President of the United States. I said, I have a totally different view. And actually, I wrote Jackie a letter. I said, Jackie, this is your life. You make your own choice. You don't have to stay as the widow of the President for the rest of your life, because if that's what you want to do, do it. And she did. But the interesting thing about that was that in that marriage thing, the same links went on because she got into some crises during that wedding, and probably one of the most important was when the son of Aristotle Onassis was killed in a helicopter crash. You'll remember that, in early 1973. She called me the next day. I had just gone to work for a French magazine called L'Express, and she said, I need you very badly. What do you want? I want you to come on a ship and go across the Atlantic with me because Ari is in terrible shape. I need you to kind of get him back in shape. So you could see that no matter whether she was linked to the Kennedy family and now to the Onassis family, she still had her links back to the old days of the Kennedy days.
Always turn back. Why do you, I mean, one of the things that, of course, we can never forget, but you can overlook at a moment like this, is that there was, of course, another great tragedy just before she married Ari Onassis. And that was that her brother-in-law, Bobby Kennedy, was also assassinated. And she was terribly afraid then at that point, wasn't she?
She was terribly afraid. There's no question about that. And she was very shaken by it. You know, all these things that have happened in the Kennedy family have had an enormous impact on those who are in the family and those who are linked to the family.
What was the relationship, Liz, in later years? I mean, clearly, everyone has come together again, as people in the Kennedy family seem to do in times of tragedy and crisis. But what was the relationship with other members of the Kennedy family in those years during the marriage and immediately after the marriage to Onassis, after he died?
Well, you know, I think that she ran away in a way after Bobby was killed. I think she thought Onassis would protect her and there would be some privacy. and isolation so her children wouldn't just grow up in this fishbowl. And that was part of her motivation. But I think she always kept her ties with the Kennedy family. I don't think she ever forgot for 1 minute that there were cousins and uncles and aunts who were related to those two children. And the greatest triumph of Mrs. Kennedy's life was that she raised these two terrific young people. They're just great.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, talk just for a moment about the subject that Pierre was discussing a moment ago, and that is the sense that Jackie Kennedy owed it to the nation, owed it to the family, owed it to the Kennedy name, in effect to spend the rest of her life being the keeper of the flame, the widow.
You know, in some ways, I think the most enduring legacy she has is that she ended up living her life the way she wanted to live it. She decided when she married Onassis that she needed freedom from that kind of heavy mantle that was being put on her. It gave her financial independence. It gave her a worldwide world to move in. But more importantly, I think, once she came back after Onassis died, she then retreated into her private world to bring up those kids. That's what she wanted to do. It's almost as if her real style and the real legacy she leaves behind is a really self-sufficient woman who led the life exactly as she wanted it to. I think all of us probably imagine that's the way we'd want to do things.
If you'd all be good enough to stand by when we come back, we'll be joined by ABC's Barbara Walters.
What is it about Ford Taurus that makes it America's best-selling car? Is it Taurus SHO with its amazing handling and 24-valve, 220-horsepower performance, its driver-oriented interior, or the unique ways SHO finds to reward the driver like no other performance sedan? Ford Taurus SHO, another reason why Taurus is the best-selling car in America. Again.
Okay, it's fixed. You sure? Looks a little strange. Oh, I've done this before. Watch.
Just when you really need it. It's Service Star's Good Neighbor Sale, going on now at a Service Star near you. Some of us need it bad. Real bad. Get a green plug electricity saver for your appliances, only $29.99. And a Lufkin 25-foot tape roll, just $8.99 at Service Star.
Still using a full commission broker? You could be missing out on a lot. Like a broker who's available anytime you want, or state-of-the-art investment software that's easy to use. To get both, trade up to Schwab. At Charles Schwab, you can manage your investments around the clock. And Street Smart software lets you place trades, get quotes, even research stocks. And at Schwab, you'll enjoy low commissions, too.
For a better way to trade up to Schwab.
Yes, nice. Very nice. Ooh, weeds. Just what I need.
Actually, what you need is Ortho Weed Be Gone.
Weed Be who?
Weed Be Gone gets rid of all kinds of weeds without burning your lawn.
Just like that.
Yep, just like that. Ortho Weed Be Gone. For a lovely weed-free lawn.
Yes, lovely. Hey, got any Moby Gone? Sick of cutting this thing.
Ortho. You're working too hard without us.
Why is today a better day for me to buy a car?
Because of the sale we're running.
What does your sale mean to me?
The price is going to be much lower.
Do you mean that we could change this price? I would like to change it lower.
When you lease the car, you would pay approximately half of what it says on the sticker.
I want to know what the best deal is I can get.
$1,500 down, $249 a month, you can drive this car.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty
I can handle
right?
that. There really is a big Toyota sale.
Jackie Kennedy Onassis is dead at the age of 64. Just about 15 minutes ago, the White House released a written statement. Forgive me while I put my glasses on and I will read it to you. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was a model of courage and dignity for all Americans and all the world. More than any other woman of her time, she captivated our nation and the world with her intellect, her elegance, and her grace. Even in the face of impossible tragedy, she carried the grief of her family and our entire nation with a power that somehow reassured all of us who mourned. We hope that Mrs. Onassis' children, John and Caroline, and her grandchildren find solace in the extraordinary contributions that she made to our country. Our thoughts and prayers are with them as we grieve with the passing of such a cherished friend. That was the statement from President and Mrs. Clinton this evening from the White House, the statement released at midnight. Joining me now is an old friend and colleague, Barbara Walters. Barbara, you knew them both well, but tell me about this woman who, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, was on the one hand so well known throughout the world, and yet in so many ways the rest of us didn't know her at all. You did.
Yes, I want to just comment a little bit on the message from the White House, because you know, I was on my way in, so I don't know whether this was said, but Mrs. Onassis became very close to Mrs. Clinton. She visited the White House several times and had tea with Mrs. Clinton. Two very different women. Jackie Kennedy, at the time that she was in the White House, was the opposite, really, of a Mrs. Clinton, worrying about the house, the flowers, the correct food. She brought the French food into the White House. In style, they were very different. I went on that, what was then a very famous trip to India with her. She rarely talked to reporters, never did in her life. But we all admire her no matter what. Year after year, she was on the most admired woman list. Because of that dignity, because of that mystery, I never heard her raise her voice. It was always that little quiet voice. I want to comment also on what Doris Kearns said. I don't think that she lived her life exactly as she wanted. Lord knows she would have lived it with Jack Kennedy. She adored him. She had said that the years at the White House were her happiest years because she was able to spend more time with him. The Onassis marriage was a disaster. Whatever she expected from it didn't happen. The years after, she really then did withdraw into herself and her close friends. Her friends were at her bedside, people she knew from the Jack Kennedy days, Mrs. Charles Wrightsman, Mrs. Paul Mellon, the friends of 25 and 30 years ago, her happiest times. And I think if we admire her the most, it was not just for what she accomplished in the White House, but it was for that dignity, that elegance that is missing so much from our lives today.
You know, Barbara, what is so difficult to remember is that when she was in the White House, and I'm speaking now as someone who has a 30-year-old daughter, and I still think of her as my kid, right? Jackie Kennedy at that time wasn't much older. She was in her early 30s, right?
Yes. Yes, with you know, little babies at that point, and going through the kind of thing that the nation understood when she lost that third child, little Patrick. I mean, that was devastating for the family. And it was at that point, after she lost that baby, that in order to make her forget things, she went off on this cruise with her sister, Lee Radziwill, who at that time was having a bit of a romance with Onassis, and that's when she met him. And that became the next stage of her life. It was almost ironic that that's how it began.
Talk about the last 10, 15 years, though. She worked as a publishing house editor.
She worked part-time as an editor, mostly in cultural endeavors. A book on Martha Graham, for example. A lovely book. She spent her summers. She took the summers off and spent them in Martha's Vineyard. Always had one great big open house in the summer. You asked about the family. And all the family then would come. The family, perhaps, that she didn't see all year long. That is the Kennedy family. Rose Kennedy, who was still alive, was not there, but the rest of the family was. So that was the big outing. I think that these were very happy, peaceful lives. Time. Maurice Templeman is an extremely erudite man. He is a businessman with most of his activities in Africa. He's in the diamond business.
You're talking about her close friend.
About her companion now, who's been seen in so many pictures with her.
Yes.
I think they were very comfortable. I think it was very cozy. She entertained very little. She went to private parties, and when she did, it was with small groups of people whom she knew very well. But I think that these were the happiest, most peaceful years. The years in the White House, Ted, were the years of a great love and turmoil. But the years as a mature woman were years that gave her a peace of mind. But essentially, she never changed. And the fact that she never, ever did an interview made her as mysterious to all of us as Garbo. Whenever anybody said, who do you want to interview, we all said, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, knowing that she never would, and in a way, being glad that she never would.
If you would all just stand by for a moment, there had, of course, as Barbara just said, been a life after the assassination in Dallas and the funeral in Washington. We caught glimpses of it through the lenses of the paparazzi on the front pages of the supermarket tabloids and the slick magazines, and occasionally even on television. But there was a life. Here's Diane Sawyer.
After the funeral, she thanked all the strangers who had tried to console her.
The knowledge of the affection in which my husband was held by all of you has sustained me, and the warmth of these tributes is something I shall never forget.
Weeks later, in a rare interview, she remembered how her dead husband had loved a song from a Broadway musical.
Camelot! Camelot!
It would become the one-word key to a door of unfulfilled dreams and memories. It was also her goodbye. The most famous and popular woman in the world, a woman even urged to run for office, decided to go into private life. 5 years later, another wrenching shock. At a hotel in Los Angeles, the nightmare repeated itself. This time, Robert Kennedy, the brother-in-law who had become her close friend. She reportedly told a friend, "I don't want to live in America anymore. I don't want my children to live in America anymore." Months later, she left the United States for Greece for a meeting with a mysterious shipping tycoon. In October 1968, she stunned the world. Jackie Kennedy became Jackie Onassis. It was greeted at the time as almost unthinkable, as though an American queen had conspired in her abduction from the throne.
It's hard to remember how shocked the world was.
The worldwide reaction was astonishment. Writer Edward Klein.
People wrote editorials in newspapers about it, taking her to task and saying, how could you do this to us, as though she had no right to live her own life.
She went to work. She became a book editor, which gave her a chance to live in the world of words she loved, without having to write them herself and give up her privacy. Author Jonathan Cott.
Her curiosity and her enthusiasm and her intuition and her imagination were so strong.
He says she shared his fascination with mysticism and lots of coffee.
You could feel highly energized for 2 or 3 days after speaking to her for an hour.
One of the few times she ever went public was in 1975. It was over her distress that New York's magnificent Grand Central Station was threatened with demolition. Ashton Hawkins, Executive Vice President of the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
She was just struck by the beauty of this great building, the great cathedral of New York, if you will, a secular cathedral. And nothing like it really is in New York. And the idea that it would disappear was very sad to her. She said it doesn't have to happen.
Grand Central was saved, and later 50 states enacted similar legislation to protect historic landmarks.
She used to say that if you don't take care of the past, you can't have much hope for the future, which is not a necessarily completely original thought, but she believed that and acted on it.
In the coming years, she would live as a real New Yorker, hailing taxis, walking, jogging, sweeping into restaurants, walking with her grandchildren. And friends say truly happy with the urbane businessman at her side, Maurice Templesman.
I think in her third act of her life, I don't think Jackie was looking for more romance. I think she had had it up to here with romance, disappointing romance, and was looking for stability and for companionship and for sharing of mutual values. And I think that's what she found with Maurice Templesman.
A man who beguiled her while she continued to beguile everyone else.
She drew you out. She paid attention and remembered everything you said. She was wonderfully focused. She had the greatest sense of humor. She made you laugh.
It was Templesman who stood by her throughout her illness. Only days ago, they strolled together with daughter Caroline in New York Central Park. A final public glimpse of a graceful woman who had cherished privacy. A life lived with joy and pain, endured and celebrated in public and private. "I've been through a lot, and I've suffered a great deal," Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis once said. "But I've had a lot of happy moments as well. I've come to the conclusion that we must not expect too much from life. You cannot separate the good from the bad, and perhaps there's no need to do so either."
That life is now over. Jacqueline Kennedy dead tonight at the age of 64. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.